Previously, our heroes, Chicken Wings, Cheese Flaps, and Philip cleared out a goblin cave in search of their employer, Gundren Rockseeker. They were unsuccessful, so they've made their way to Phandalin. Hey guys, it's time for another campaign diary of a Lost Mine of Phandelver campaign that I'm running. It's been a while, but it's been a while since we played. So, the three arrived in the rough and tumble town of Phandalin, kind of on the frontier of some wilderness that they were beating back. They took their leave of Sildar, the man they rescued from the cave, who was a companion of Gundren Rockseeker, and they made their way to Barthen's Provisions, where they were told to deliver the supplies that they were tasked with bringing. Upon arriving in Phandalin, the group was already in a little bit of a tizzy because of something that I did. What I did was I knew that Philip and Cheese Flaps were going to need a little bit of time because they leveled up from the Goblin Cave, so they were going to have to pick out new spells, being a cleric and a wizard. Chicken Wings, on the other hand, was a rogue, and so what he got from leveling up took a lot less time to explain. So, what I did was, we're using the starter pack characters. So everybody on the back of their sheet has a bit of background that ties them into the adventure. On our second session, Cheese Flap was actually the first to notice this and was like, my guy wants to come here to beat up the Redbrand threat, which we'll get to in a bit. So I figured, hey, Chicken Wings has like an even deeper connection to this town. He used to be a member of the Redbrands, this gang that's kind of treading on some toes in town. And so while Philip and Cheese Flaps were picking out their spells, I took Chicken Wings out of the room and I told him about this backstory, and I was prepared to kind of roleplay through how he had gotten to the point, because his backstory includes him getting kicked out of the gang because he was framed for murder, and that's how he ends up in this party and not part of the Redbrands. But what I discovered when I told him about his past, he got so excited he was almost ready to walk back out of the room right away with that piece of information, just that. And so I was like, wait! Because what I was going to roleplay, there's a creature in the Redbrand hideout called the Nothic. And so I was going to have him be special in that his initiation test was to acquire the Nothic for the Redbrands. And that's something went wrong there. I was going to improvise as we roleplayed that, and that's how he got kicked out. And so he was going to know that the Redbrands kept this monster as a guard. And so because he was so boundless, so bouncy, it was almost just that I got to tell him those facts. I told him that the Nothic really liked fresh meat and shiny trinkets. So that set him off. That was pretty much like all he needed, and it was all I could do to contain him and give it a few more minutes for the other guys to pick their spells. So we come back in, and it's almost like Chicken Wings is just overflowing with information and excitement. And so it's very difficult to get the party focused and into the town. And so in my attempt to make Chicken Wings feel special and give the other guys time to pick out their spells, I almost hindered the rest of the experience, because all of a sudden here was this one person who knew a lot more about the rest of the town and didn't really remember things all at the same time, didn't really have a clear picture of it because he wasn't fully listening. It's a reminder that he is kind of a younger kid, and so maybe it was a little bit ambitious of me to try to do that with him. But again, this is kind of a growing, learning experience for me, dungeon mastering for these guys as well. So I'm glad I tried it, and I'm learning from it for the next time. They deliver the supplies to Barthen's Provisions, which is what they were tasked with, and they were very keen on getting a payout, much more so than starting to talk to NPCs, because this NPC dropped the information that he believed that Gundren found the map to the Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is the title of the adventure and it's kind of what everything leads to. And I tried to really stress that, and I think because there was so much going on with Chicken Wings very excited and with interacting with NPCs for the first time, that didn't really land. So we'll see how we can develop that. I did tweak the town a little bit. I inserted one of my own NPCs because I felt like it, a half-orc named Thomas, and I had him start unloading their supplies, and they were like, ooh, wow, a half-orc, that's cool, he's super strong, maybe we can recruit him. And so this group that's new at this, I'm learning, wants to do everything at once. They want to try everything, and I'm having a bit of a hard time keeping up with that. However, we kept working on role-playing and talking to NPCs. And so that's what we did. They talked to Thomas and they talked to Elmar, and then kind of the rest of the session was talking to people, and we'll get into the details, but I think they grew into it. After the confusion of the first few minutes that I caused, I think it kind of evened out, and what ended up happening is Philip has kind of become the mouthpiece for the party. He's Chicken Wing's dad, and so I've learned that he is not really keen on the combat, the game aspect of Dungeons & Dragons, but we learned from this session he very much likes talking to the NPCs. He's very good at interrogating, and so they went around interrogating. They met the barkeep of the Stonehill Inn. They quickly learned from a lot of different NPCs that they really don't like the Redbrands. They're kind of pressing their thumb down on a lot of the townspeople. The barkeep in particular was like, I got to keep my head down because I have a family. I can't really stand up for people. I got to keep my own safe. And the party didn't like that. They were actually pretty upset at this guy, angry at this guy. I don't think what has clicked for them is they're the adventurers. They're the guys who come in and fix everything. And that's like why some of the NPCs don't really do anything, is so that the adventurers can come in and the players can be the heroes. So I thought that was interesting that it instilled this really passionate response in some of them of being mad at this guy for doing nothing in the face of this evil. Another thing they secured from the Goblin Cave was a stolen shipment from the Lion Shield Coster, a merchant company. So they found that in town and returned it to Leona, the owner, who was grateful and paid them. And by this point, so they had talked to a lot of the townspeople who were unhappy with the Redbrands. They were setting about recruiting an army. That's really what they snapped into, was how many people can we get to go up against these guys? Because I don't think they are acquainted with the style of Dungeons & Dragons where it's the people at the table fighting all the baddies. Maybe in addition to that, like an NPC that the Dungeon Master controls. Like, 3 to 5 guys fighting the baddies. But they were like, hey, what can you do for us if we fight the Redbrands? Blah, 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 blah. And she directed them across the way to Halia, who is the owner of the Miners' Exchange, because she knows that there's some sort of thing going on between her and the Redbrands. What Halia has going on with the Redbrands is she doesn't want to get rid of them. She wants to take them over and lead them instead. And the players picked up on that pretty quickly. But what she did is she offered a payout for eliminating the current leader of the Redbrands, this mysterious wizard Glassstaff, who showed up a few months ago. And as well as any communications they might find within his keep. But Philip immediately is like, what are you going to offer us to start to get into this hideout and kill him? How are we supposed to do this? And Holly is like, well, I have some information that might interest you. I've heard that you want to get up to the Goblin Castle to rescue your employer, Gundren. And they're like, how do you know that? And she's like, I have my ways. And they're like, that's not really going to help us with this task of overthrowing Glassstaff. What else you got? And she's like, well, that's what I got. And so eventually they kind of settle on learning this information, which is that there's a goblin slave that the Redbrands keep that would know the way directly to the castle. So they move on from there, kind of dissatisfied, but there are also rumblings of a plan forming. In the meantime, they go to a farm on the south of the town and meet Quelline, a halfling farmer, and her son, Carp. Now, Carp has seen some things. Carp has seen some Redbrands exiting this secret tunnel in the woods that are kind of connected, that are near the manor, which is what everybody figures that their hideout is. And so they kind of learn about this back door. Now, at this point, the party hadn't seen the Redbrands in action, so I actually had them show up at the farm. I said you can see these guys with red cloaks coming in the distance, and so they chose to hide. And what they witnessed was them extorting Quelline for this sort of regular payment, this protection payment. Because, you wouldn't want anything to happen to your precious son. That's not the voice that I used, but you get the idea. And so that kind of steeled their resolve of like, okay, all right, let's do something about these guys. And part of the plan that was forming, which the book mentioned was a definite possibility, is to kill some Redbrands, steal our cloaks, and sneak in. And everybody's like, well, where all the Redbrands hang out is the Sleeping Giant Tavern close to the manor. So they head there, and I didn't quite play this right. I had them get all buddy-buddy with some Redbrands, and they got kind of drunk and kind of offered up some information that they were kind of in the slave trade. The party got hints of that because they asked what they were bringing out of the secret tunnels, and he said, like, maybe human-sized packages. I don't know if I was laying it on too thick, but who knows. And so they're talking to these Redbrands, and it's been a while, so I don't quite remember exactly what else they dropped. I think I might have iterated again that the black spider is at the head of it all, somewhere off in the distance. But the Redbrands go back up to their rooms to sleep, and the party sneaks up after them. And so what I maybe should have done is let them happen upon the Redbrands all sleeping, because they had been rolling pretty well for their persuasion and deception checks. Instead, because I wanted to do the combat encounter like it is in the book, I had them all waiting in the bedroom, ready to pounce, ready to fight. Except for one guy who was like particularly drunk or something like that. Again, what I'm learning is that this party doesn't really like combat, and I think I need to pump it up in some way to get them into it more. Because we play infrequently, it's sort of like they have to learn the rules again every time. So I'm not sure how to approach that, because combat is definitely part of the game, and so I don't want to eliminate it completely. So that's another practice thing, I think. But in any case, they are successful with killing all these Redbrands. They take, conveniently, 4 cloaks. I figured since there were 3 of them and they talked about recruiting Thomas in particular, I would give them 4. However, this is where that new player ingenuity, imagination, exploration came in. What they figured was, hey, Chicken Wings, you have this history with the Redbrands. Up until this point, they had been encountering a lot of new recruits, so none of them recognized Chicken Wings. But their plan was to have him walk out into the open and declare, I'm back, I want a trial for my framed murder. And so their hope was that this would draw a lot of Redbrands out of the manor so they could see what was going on and even have him brought before Glassstaff for a trial. And the other part of the plan was that Cheese Flaps, Phillips, and Thomas would sneak into the secret entrance and kill Glassstaff while all the other Redbrands were out of the manor. Now that would be fine, except that their hope after that was to replace Glassstaff with Philip as the leader of the Redbrands, because they figured since the townspeople had never seen Glassstaff and the Redbrands were presumably dumb thugs, they would be able to pull that over on them. And then what they would do is that they would gather all the Redbrands and they would storm the Goblin Castle to rescue Gundren. Now, this was a lot to process for me because, like, potentially they would be recruiting, like, 10, 12 guys to go storm this castle that should be beatable with 3 to 5 people. So my initial reaction was like, no way is this happening. And then I thought, well, I mean, it is their adventure. If this is what they want to try for, I should take some time and figure out exactly how that would work if they were successful. So we join our heroes next time as they try to pull off their master plan and become leaders of the Redbrands. Oh boy.